Hi, welcome to the Module 2 presentation. Okay, so this is an activity that's going to be a part of your discussion board. I want you to consider all of the factors that we read about last week that are things that you should consider when working with ELLs. And out of all of those factors, I want you to make a list of your top 5 questions you would want parents to answer about their child. We are going to be working on this list, and it's going to form into a needs assessment. I want you to start with just your top 5. After today's lesson, you'll be able to define second language acquisition. You'll be able to name other fields that contribute to second language acquisition. We're going to learn about the critical period hypothesis and the role of age in second language acquisition. We're also going to take a look at Jeannie's story. She has a very unique story that contributed a lot to the field of second language acquisition. And then we will explore the 5 stages of second language acquisition. So second language acquisition is the field that studies how people acquire a second language or any language after their native language. It emerged during the second half of the 20th century when communicating globally became more prominent. So people just weren't communicating with people in their communities that had the same language, but people needed to communicate with others outside of their communities. And just to clear this up, learning a second language and learning a foreign language look different. However, they're acquired the same. So people usually acquire a second language over a long period of time. It's not just take this class for one semester and you will learn the language. So people usually acquire it over a long period of time through immersion. Learning a foreign language is usually in a short chunk or period of time, and it's through a classroom setting only. So there are several fields that contribute to the research and the body of work in the field of second language acquisition. Those fields are linguistics, which is the study of language, sociology, which is the study of social relationships, biology, the study of living things, anthropology, the study of human societies, culture and their development, and psychology, the study of the mind. Okay, so I'm going to do something that all good teachers do with all students, especially with English language learners. I'm going to activate your background knowledge, and I'm going to create a bridge from something that you already know about to something that's new, something that you're going to learn about. So I would like for you to pause the video and stop and think about, what do you know how babies develop language? If you've ever been around a baby, if you have a baby, how do they develop language? How does language change for them from being a baby, an infant, to a toddler, to a school-age child, a teenager? How did that language develop for them? So the role of age in acquiring a language is significant. When we acquire our native language, we become exposed to that language as babies in our mother's womb. We are taking in language. When you acquire a second language, it begins when the person starts to interact with another language. So for some, it could begin at 5 years old. For some, it could begin at 16 or 54. However, our native language, we all begin at the same time as infants in our mother's wombs. This leads us to the critical hypothesis, the critical period hypothesis, excuse me. So the critical period hypothesis states that there's an age where learning a second language is best. The speaker has the best opportunity to become native-like. The prime age for learning a language is between birth and puberty, which is around 12 years old. After that prime age, their chance of developing native-like fluency or ultimate attainment is reduced. So this is a video of Jeannie's story. I will introduce it. However, I'm going to have you watch this video on your own. I've linked it in your week 3 module 2 folder. So Jeannie was discovered in 1970. She was isolated with little to no language exposure until the age of 13. This is something that is unique to her case because scientists don't have the opportunity to not expose children to language because that's not ethical. This happened to Jeannie, and they took advantage of her situation to study how age affects language. So she became interested in learning words, which helped develop her vocabulary, but soon she fossilized and she basically plateaued. She hit a brick wall. And even though she was learning a lot of vocabulary, she really lacked the capacity to develop grammar. And scientists studied Jeannie and the way that age played a part in her developing language and grammar and vocabulary, and that added a lot to the field of second language acquisition. So you can watch this video on your own. It is linked. And these are a few discussion questions, and these will also be a part of your discussion board activity for the week. Okay, so there are 5 stages of second language acquisition. Some of the research that I read said that there were 6 stages. We're going to study these 5 stages. So the first one is the silent period, early production, speech emergence, intermediate fluency, and advanced fluency. And while we're studying these, we are going to parallel what we're studying to babies and what we know about babies when they develop language. So I really like this chart, and I've attached a different one in your resource folder. But I really like this one because of the 2 acronyms that are on the left side. The first acronym is BICS, and that stands for Basic Interpersonal Communication Skills. That is social language. During these stages, learners are exploring social language. After BICS is CALP. CALP stands for Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency, and this is academic language. Okay, this is another video, and the video just explains BICS and CALPs more thoroughly than I did. Please watch it. It is linked under your Module 2 folder. Okay, so the first stage is the silent or receptive, you might hear pre-productive stage. Okay, so learners are interacting with new language, however, they're not producing language yet. Okay, so I put on there input, not output. They're comprehending, they're taking language in, they're not producing. Students will use gestures such as nodding yes and no to get their basic needs met. And it can last up to 6 months. It can last even longer. So some of the phrases that students can nod yes or no to would be bathroom or eat. So they could nod yes if they need to go to the bathroom, or no. Or if they want to eat, they could nod yes or no. Some gestures that the teacher might use, so this goes down to the teacher behaviors portion, would be motioning for them to come here. So you would say come here, but you would also use your hand to motion for them to come here, or using your hand to motion for them to stand up. Another teacher behavior is to use simple, short speech. So you wouldn't want to say a whole sentence to them. Do you want to go to the bathroom now or later? You would say one word, bathroom. That's a question. Okay? And then you would repeat things all the time, lots of repetition. Because remember, just because students are silent does not mean that they are not engaging with language. Okay. And I want to compare this to babies in the womb and infants. In a womb, a baby isn't producing language. However, they are taking in language. Okay. And that's the same thing as infants. They're not talking, they're not producing language. However, they are absorbing the language that they hear. Okay, the next stage is early production. And actually, I forgot to add this earlier. The stage numbers aren't really as important as it is that you know that language is learned through a process. Students just don't, travel, become a newcomer, enroll in school, and they go from being a newcomer to a week of being able to engage with academic vocabulary. There's a process that learners go through to learn a language. So, stage 2, early production. Students will begin to respond to your output with 1 or 2 word phrases. Okay? And students, I guess not a phrase, 1 to 2 word utterances. So students must be given a chance to produce language without being corrected. And they have to be encouraged to take a lot of risk. Okay. And this stage could last 6 months to 1 year. And I want to compare this stage to a toddler. Toddlers use phrases and they're starting to experience with language more, and they're seeing what works and what doesn't work. Okay. And you have to let kids use the language. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say kids. You have to let learners use the language as much as possible without correction. They're really trying to experiment with the language and see what they can produce and if it works. And some teacher behaviors would be to expect grammar and pronunciation errors and to not directly correct errors and to do lots of modeling. These are my nieces. They are twins and they are, I think, in the early production stage. They say phrases like Olivia bite or mommy no. They're starting to put words together and then they're experimenting with them. They see if they work and if we respond to them. Okay, the next stage is stage 3. This is speech emergence. And just like the word emergence implies, students explode with more language. So there's an increase of output, and they start to use short phrases and put sentences together, and their comprehension becomes more complex. So this student could maybe understand a 2-step direction instead of a 1-step direction. And when you ask them a question, it's not just one word. What they're able to do is becoming more complex. And they require many language supports. And we'll learn more about those language supports throughout the course. And this stage can last for 1 to 3 years. Okay? So some behaviors students need to be engaged with realia. Those are real objects that promote comprehension. So if you're teaching about fruit, you would actually bring fruit. If you're teaching about reading the newspaper, you would let them experience a newspaper. So they hear the vocabulary and then they get to actually reach out and touch real objects. You would also provide them lots of opportunities to talk and to practice their speaking, to practice what they're learning. And in cases where you have to assess them, you would give them a performance-based assessment. So instead of doing a paper and pencil test, they could answer orally. So you can see what they're actually able to do without pushing them to the point of frustration where they shut down. The next stage is stage 4, and these are intermediate fluency. That's the stage. And excuse me, students begin to demonstrate a near native-like fluency. However, beware of thinking that these students don't need language support. They may sound native-like, and at this point, they've really gotten the bigs down. So they really have social language down. However, they're beginning to enter into a point where they're going to struggle with academic language. So these students sound like they can speak, and you may think, oh, they're fine, they can communicate. Yes, they are really good at social language. Now they need help with academic language. So they still need language support. However, they require fewer language supports because they're able to get their needs met. They need it specifically in the area of academic language. And this stage can last 3 to 5 years. And some teacher behaviors are providing content-based, high-level literacy experiences. They need to be involved with content, not so much foundational skills anymore, and social language skills like asking to go to the bathroom, asking for things, retelling. They need more challenging content-based, rigorous experiences. Okay? And then also, at this point, you have to recognize that learners are in a transition. They're transitioning from learning to read, those foundational skills, to reading to learn. So applying the foundational skills that they've learned to learn even more. Okay, and the last stage is stage 5, the advanced language fluency stage. And at this stage, students have native-like fluency. They require very little language support. However, they might not be to the point where they could test out of an ELL program. Okay, and that could last 5 to 7 years. One of the main teacher behaviors is monitoring. We don't just want to release these students into the class without considering that they are English language learners. So they require monitoring. Also, we have to provide them with rigorous grade level coursework that will continue to challenge them and help them to grow. And then give them opportunities to express their opinion, to debate, to support their point of view orally. This reinforces their language skills. Okay, so we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit and we're going to look at the U-shaped hypothesis. So I really like the U because it visually shows us and questions the flow of acquisition, both culturally and linguistically, for language learners. So the first stage would be the honeymoon stage, or first step is the honeymoon step. This is when everything is going good. Culturally, they're excited to engage with the new culture. Linguistically, they're excited to engage with the new language. Things are going good. The next step or stage is hostility. Okay, this is a time when there is friction between their home culture, their home language, and this is when they're really in the trenches of learning. Things are starting to get tough. Okay, and this stage is where they feel in between. They're not as connected to their home culture and language, and they're not totally connected to their new target language and culture. And so they don't know where they belong. They're kind of in the middle. Okay, and the next step is the humor step, and they go under mentorship or encouragement in the right direction. And hopefully they're encouraged to make the best out of their experiences. Okay, and then finally they reach the home step. And that's where they find a new place to develop. Culturally, they're fitting in more. Linguistically, they're starting to understand more and be able to comprehend more and even produce more. So then people are able to comprehend them. And that cuts down on, excuse me, frustration. And so that makes belonging and fitting in feel better for them. Okay, and the U-shaped hypothesis is important because first it shows that there's a process, that new speakers, newcomers go through. There's a process that they experience, and it's seen in classrooms. And so this is another factor for teachers to consider. If you know somebody is in a hostility step or stage, you are going to approach their needs differently. Okay, these are the references. That is all I have for you. If you have any questions about this content or material, please feel free to email me. Again, there is going to be a quiz, and there are also going to be discussion board activities that you have to complete. Have a great week. Please be safe in this weather